When we think of Paul McCartney, we picture the smiling Beatle with a gift for melody, the man behind timeless songs like Yesterday and Hey Jude. But hidden behind that cheerful public image was a storm of anger, betrayal, and bitterness. And while McCartney had plenty of rivals and critics across his long career, there was one man he grew to despise more than anyone else. That man was none other than John Lennon. John Lennon, Paul, and John started as inseparable friends back in 1957. Together, they crafted the greatest songwriting partnership in rock history. But by the late 1960s, their relationship was collapsing. Lennon often dismissed Paul's carefully arranged songs as granny music, while Paul saw John as reckless and careless with the band's future. The final blow came when Lennon released his 1971 solo track, How Do You Sleep? A direct attack on McCartney. John sneered that Paul's music was shallow and mocked him for only writing Yesterday. To Paul, this was more than a creative disagreement. It was a dagger from the one person he trusted most. Friends later recalled that Paul never forgave the cruelty of those words. Yoko Ono. While John Lennon was the center of Paul's anger, Yoko Ono was also a figure of resentment. From McCartney's perspective, Yoko didn't just enter John's life, she entered the Beatles. She was present at recording sessions, whispering in John's ear, and challenging the band's old ways. Paul felt pushed aside, as though the bond he had built with John since their teenage years was suddenly being rewritten. Although Paul rarely attacked Yoko directly in public, his private comments revealed bitterness. He believed she fueled John's contempt toward him, and he could never accept how their once close brotherhood had been replaced by a new partnership. Alan Klein, if John and Yoko were the emotional side of Paul's anger, Alan Klein represented the business betrayal. After the death of Beatles manager Brian Epstein in 1967, the band desperately needed new direction. Paul wanted his in-laws, the Eastman family, to manage their affairs. But John, George, and Ringo sided with Klein, a man Paul considered manipulative and greedy. For McCartney, this wasn't just a disagreement about money. He felt Klein symbolized everything wrong with the industry, selfishness and dishonesty. Paul's hatred ran so deep that in 1970, he sued the other Beatles to dissolve their business partnership. To him, siding with Klein was proof that the others no longer respected or trusted him. George Harrison, Paul's relationship with George had always been complicated. As the band's youngest member, George often struggled to have his songs taken seriously. By the late 1960s, he was writing classics like Something and Here Comes the Sun, but he felt overshadowed by the Lennon-McCartney dominance. When George sided with John and Klein during the breakup, Paul took it as a personal betrayal. In Paul's eyes, George had chosen loyalty to Lennon over their shared history. Their disagreements often turned into heated arguments in the studio, with George once famously snapping at Paul, "I'll play whatever you want me to play, or I won't play at all." That frustration left scars Paul never forgot. Ringo's star out. Of all the Beatles, Paul's issues with Ringo were the least bitter, but they were still painful. Ringo, who had been the steady heartbeat of the band, chose to align with John and George when it came to Klein. To Paul, it felt like being abandoned by his entire family. Though Paul and Ringo later repaired their friendship, the sting of knowing that even Ringo had once stood against him deepened his sense of isolation during the breakup years.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.